story, because this story I think might be familiar to you. In one of them, they were in a farmhouse. It was wintertime, and they were, all the Nazis had put them in this farmhouse for the night. And they exchanged clothes with with enlisted officers, not officers, enlisted men, and buried themselves in the hay. And the next morning, the Nazis gathered everybody up and marched off with them, and they went a different direction. So he does tell them how they were escaped and how they also were recaptured. And in several instances, he was put in front of a firing squad. But they always, for whatever reason, they didn't pull the trigger.
Is that all in the book?
It is. It's all in the book. It is all in the book. Yes?
Couple questions. First one, did the bar owner give you the photographs? And second, what about your other uncle?
Thank you. Yeah, the two of the uncles were paratroopers. And the oldest one, Robert C. Carroll, who was the commander of the 101st, of the 1st Battalion of the 101st, was the older brother. So he was my dad looked up to him as to a hero. He copied everything he did, including joining the paratroopers. And so they were, cut out of the same cloth, if you will. The other brother was going to be different, and that's why he joined the Navy. And he also ended up becoming a botanist at Oklahoma State University and worked there for a lot of years after he made it home. But they all enlisted at the same time, essentially. And the photographs are still in Corn, England. I got to get back there and get copies of the original photographs. But some of the newspaper articles, such as in the book, and a couple of the photographs are in the book, in fact.
Related to that famous author, are you? Robert C. Carroll?
No, not related to that
It's
author.
just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence. There's a lot. Carroll is like Jones. Carroll is the Irish Jones. Any other questions? Yes?
I recently read a book by Rita Crosby about her father, and it was called A Quiet Hero. And I think any of the veterans that I don't talk about these things. And what he went through to get out to escape from the prison was unbelievably horrendous.
Yeah.
A quiet hero.
Very good point. A quiet hero really describes the greatest generation. One thing you can see in the book, it's something that's so visual, I didn't put it up here, but it's so visual you couldn't miss it. There's a photograph of my father and his brothers before they go to war, in their khaki whites, all cleaned up, spruced up, weighing about 180 pounds. There's a photograph of him from off Flight 64, where he weighs about 90 pounds. And he looks like he weighs 90 pounds. And he's got a look on his face that you wouldn't want to run into him in a dark alley. He had nightmares for years after World War II. I don't think they coined the term PTSD at that time. So that was not just a silent generation, but the silent suffering generation. Many of those vets suffered in silence. He never told us the bad stories about World War II. He told us only glimpses of things that I had to pull together later and piece together what the bad stories were.
How was he liberated?
He was liberated by the Russians.
By Russians?
Yep, the Russians rolled in with their big tanks, and that's when they got sent home through Egypt. Yes.
How long have you been writing?
Since 2004. I wrapped up the writing part in 2011, 2012, but then it took that long to get it published and, edited, published, and all that kind of good stuff. So really, almost 10 years working on the project. Yeah, long time. Any other questions?
Did your mother live to see the two return home?
His mother?
Yes.
Yeah.
Your grandmother.
Yep, she did. She lived to see them, to be reunited with both of her sons. She sure did. She lived a long life, and needless to say, was much happier when she got two of her three sons back anyway. Though the sad part is that oldest one was the real hero of the family. Isn't that sometimes the case where we lose those people that the family members really cherish the most, are really contributors.
We spoke briefly before today. You were gonna mention why you think Wyoming produces paratroopers.
Well, this is a point that actually James Webb brings up in his book, Born Fighting. And he doesn't focus just on Wyoming or just on Kansas. He also focuses on some of the South. And it does have to do with the Scots-Irish and the migration of the Scots-Irish. Point being is that those folks who were fighting the border wars in England were still fighting when they got here, and have always been where our armed forces have been drawn from. And they're brave. They're folks that are willing to say, sure, there's a war going on, something bad's happening, I'll go jump out of a plane, or do something else equally, maybe crazy, like go in a submarine.
Are you related to any clans? Other Scottish clans? They were disbanded and
Yeah, not that I know of.
they like to fight.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
where that fighting kind of
exactly,
image from.
exactly.
Brave
So there's
heart.
maybe some genetic
Brave
something
heart.
there, Braveheart there. I don't know, but there are a lot of an inordinate amount of people drawn from that cultural background. Plus, they grew up in the mountains where they did rappelling and hiking. And one of the stories I tell early in the story is my dad, as an 11-year-old, would take the tourists over Granite Pass from Sheridan to Yellowstone as an 11-year-old. Over a road that was dirt with no railing. And those are some high passes, 8,000 feet, some pretty high passes. And doing that as a kid, you might not have much fear of jumping out of an airplane. Kind of takes that away. Now, in front of enemy fire, though, that's a different thing. But when I asked him, when I was older, I asked him, hey, why don't you teach me how to get, I want to go parachuting. No interest. No interest in doing it recreationally. He had done it plenty in World War II. He wasn't going to do it anymore.
You were talking about the Russians capturing Americans. Why was that the case? I thought the Russians were allies.
At the beginning of the war, they were on the same side.
Well, they were on the same. What was talking about there were some congressional hearings that were done in the 80s, 1980s, about prisoners of war who were not prisoners of Nazi, or who were not prisoners of the Russians initially. They were Nazi prisoners that had been released from the Nazis, liberated by the Russians, but never made it home. Instead, they were in the Soviet Union, behind the Iron Curtain, with no way to get home. And some people said that they were there working essentially as slaves. I don't know if that's true. But according to the congressional hearings that were done in the 80s, there were a lot of people that didn't make it home that were not deceased. So, it could be, but I don't know the facts there. Yes?
What did your dad do after the war? Did he continue his photography, or did he have another position of employment?
He was always a photographer. I do photography today, finally realizing that he taught me. I didn't really realize I was educated until I always helped him with his lights and everything. He was always a photographer, but he went to law school when he returned. And when he was just about to graduate from law school, he was drafted into the Korean War. He was always a little angry about that. So he never finished his law degree, and he ended up working in contracts and grants for CSU as an administrator.
That's after he was a POW?
After he was a
He
POW,
was drafted again?
he was drafted again. Yeah.
That sounds strange.
Maybe not very fair, But that's the way it worked out. So he served in two wars. He served both in World War II and in the Korean War. I think a lot of World War II vets also served in the Korean War. Wasn't that uncommon?
You recommended a book by Wallace McKean.
McKeon, and you can find this online. The Sons of DeWitt County. There's a whole online thing of the Sons of DeWitt County. It's a compilation of various writers, old-timey, cowboy writers. So McKeon is somebody who went around and collected stories and then put them all together. And I think that there's several books out there. I tried to get some of the books, but you have to go to Texas and you get them from a reference librarian, and they don't send them to you, and they're not in print anymore. But a whole lot of it they put online, and the stories are really fascinating. I put some of those cowboy stories in the book just for fun. People riding on the trail, and they tried to cross through the river, and they took all their clothes off, to put it up on the rafts so that when they got to the other side, their clothes would be dry. But one of those rafts got lost. So there's now some naked cowboys, really sunburned cowboys with nothing but a hat and boots. So I hope if you read the book that you enjoy the cowboy stories as much as I had fun putting them in there, because they were a lot of fun. But I do think that there's a continuity between our cowboy history and the type of people that won World War II. I think there's a continuity in character, if you will. I'm not sure how strong that character is today in the United States, but it sure was then. It's very strong then. Any other questions? If not, I want to thank you guys very much for being here. Really appreciate it. And please pass on your stories. They're real important. Thank you.